The smell of coffee always wakes me up before my alarm. I shuffle into the kitchen, still in my pajamas, and start flipping pancakes. David is already at the table, reading the morning paper, that familiar half smile on his face that always makes my chest tighten. I watch him for a moment, as I always do. He's my safe place, my home, the man I trusted with everything. "You're spoiling me, Maria," he says without looking up, his eyes crinkling in amusement. "I spoil you because you deserve it," I reply, smiling. We shared that small, perfect moment. No words needed, just a glance, a shared heartbeat that feels like a promise. Marriage, I've learned, isn't always easy. But with David, I thought it was simple. Love, trust, shared routines, morning coffee, evening walks, weekend trips, all the little things that made life feel anchored. I loved him so completely, it scared me sometimes, and I wanted him to feel the same way about me. That evening, I watched him leave for work from the driveway. She waved, briefcase in hand, then leaned in to kiss my hand before slipping into the car. "Be safe," I called after him, trying to mask the flutter in my stomach. "Always," he replied, and drove off. We had routines that made life predictable and safe, and I loved predictability. Until the cracks began to show. It started that night in our bedroom. I was curled up with a book while David sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling on his phone. He murmured something softly, so low I barely caught it. "Emily, I'll see you tomorrow." My heart skipped. I froze, holding my breath, my eyes fixed on him. "Did I hear that right? Emily? David, who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked at me, a soft smile on his face. "Just a colleague from work. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." That phrase settled in my chest like a stone. I wanted to believe him. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but something in my gut told me otherwise. The next few weeks, I began noticing things. Little things. His phone buzzing when he stepped out of the room. The faint scent of perfume on his clothes that wasn't mine. Deleted messages that left empty voids in our digital lives. I started questioning myself. Am I imagining this? I'd catch him glancing at me quickly when I entered a room, a flash of guilt crossing his face, and every time I brought it up, he'd brush it off with a smile, a touch, a reassuring word. "You're overthinking, Maria." What I wasn't overthinking, something was off, and the thought refused to leave me. I felt like I was walking on glass, every step uncertain, every glance suspicious. One evening, at dinner, I tried to focus on the wine and the flickering candlelight, forcing myself to laugh at his jokes. But my mind kept drifting back to that whispered name, Emily. Why did it haunt me so? When his phone buzzed, he excused himself. My heart sank as he walked away. I tried to eat my salad, but my appetite was gone. I wanted to trust him. I needed to trust him. But deep down, I knew something was hidden from me. Secrets always have a way of clawing into your life, even the life you thought was perfect. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. David was asleep beside me, the rise and fall of his chest comforting and terrifying all at once. My mind replayed the whisper, over and over. "Emily." I reached out, touching his hand gently, hesitant. The warmth of it should have soothed me, but it didn't. My heart was heavy with questions I wasn't ready to ask. Love or doubt? I whispered to myself in the darkness. The silence in response was deafening. The next morning, the same routine repeated. Breakfast, coffee, a cheery wave, goodbye as he left for work. But everything felt different. The cracks were growing, invisible but undeniable. I tried to laugh at his jokes, tried to smile, but a shadow lingered over my perfect life. I glanced at my phone, nothing new. Yet my fingers hovered over the screen, itching to know, to see, to confirm. Should I check? Should I let it go? I didn't know anymore. This was the beginning. The first whisper of doubt that would grow into an echo I couldn't ignore. The first small crack that would eventually shatter everything I thought I knew. I loved him. I trusted him. But even love has limits when doubt creeps in, silently, slowly, until it consumes the heart entirely. And that night, as I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, I realized our perfect marriage might not be what it seemed. Something was hiding, and I had no idea how deep it went. It started as little things. I thought maybe I was imagining it at first, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. David's phone was always on silent when I walked into the room. Sometimes, it would buzz quietly when he thought I wasn't looking. And those tiny excuses just worked stuff. Nothing important suddenly felt hollow. Then came the perfume. I'll never forget it. I was folding laundry when I noticed the faint scent on his coat. Not his usual cologne, something floral, soft, but unmistakably not mine. I held it close to my nose and froze, my stomach twisting. No, you're imagining it, I whispered to myself, but I wasn't. Days later I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the red flags kept multiplying. Deleted messages, sudden password changes, secretive behavior, all little pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. I caught myself checking his phone once, then quickly looked away. My hands were trembling, heart hammering, guilt mixing with fear. Am I going insane? I asked the empty room, my voice barely a whisper. The more I tried to ignore it, the more my instincts screamed. Something was wrong, and it wasn't going to disappear just because I wished it would. One evening, I was cleaning the kitchen after dinner when a message flashed on his phone. I wasn't looking for it, but there it was. A small, innocent notification. That changed everything. Can't wait to see you, Emily. I dropped the dish I was holding. My hand shook so badly I almost cut myself. I stared at the message as if it could somehow explain itself. But there was no explanation. Just my husband's name, my husband's phone, and her name, Emily. I confronted him that night. My voice was trembling, though I tried to keep it steady. David, who is Emily? He looked at me, calm, reassuring, and I felt my resolve waver for a split second. Maria, it's nothing. Just an old friend. You're overthinking, he said. That soft, familiar tone that used to comfort me. But it didn't. Not this time. Why are you texting her so late at night then? I pressed. He smiled, just slightly, a dangerous mix of charm and avoidance. I told you, it's nothing. You're imagining things, Maria. Gaslighting. I recognized it now. The way he twisted reality to make me question my own sanity. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but I swallowed it down. After that night, I couldn't sleep. I started watching him more closely, keeping notes in my head. Where he went, who he called, how long he stayed on his phone. It felt wrong, and yet I couldn't stop. I began tracking his business trips. They were always important, meetings, supposedly across town, sometimes out of state. But I started noticing discrepancies, the receipts, the emails, the vague timeline. Something didn't add up. One afternoon, while he was in the shower, I decided to check. I felt guilty, panicked, and terrified all at once. But I needed to. No, I needed proof. His phone unlocked easily. He'd left it unattended, and I almost couldn't bring myself to touch it. My heart was racing as I scrolled. The deleted messages were gone, but some notifications lingered, and the names were enough to make my stomach drop. Emily. Again and again. It wasn't just the messages, it was the way he carried himself. He laughed a little too loudly when I asked innocuous questions. He would glance at his phone mid-conversation and quickly look away when I noticed. The trust I had placed in him, the foundation of our marriage, was crumbling beneath me. And yet, I still loved him, still needed him. How could someone you love so completely be living a lie? I asked the empty room, tears sliding down my cheeks. I began leaving little notes to myself. Check the bank statements, look for travel receipts, ask Emily discreetly, each one a breadcrumb leading deeper into the labyrinth I was just beginning to uncover. One night, I noticed something else, a faint scent lingering on his suit jacket, floral and intoxicating, the kind of perfume women wear. My stomach knotted. I touched the fabric, and for the first time, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Was he seeing her? I started secretly following him on the rare occasions he said he had work errands. My hands shook with adrenaline and fear. I felt like I was losing myself, but I couldn't stop. Every instinct in my body screamed, find out the truth. There were moments I almost broke, like the night I found a deleted message that simply said, I miss you, can't wait to see you. No name, but I knew. I knew. My heart shattered into pieces I didn't think could mend. I tried confronting him again, carefully, softly, like I could catch him off guard without him realizing I was aware. "David, you're lying to me, aren't you?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He looked at me with those eyes that had once held nothing but love for me. "And yet, no, Maria. I would never lie to you. You're imagining things." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand the truth, but I couldn't, not yet. I knew I had to investigate further. Alone, quietly, secretly, I started documenting everything. Phone logs, bank statements, emails, timesheets. I even noted the nights he came home late, the perfume, the sudden changes in his behavior. I was building a map of deception that I wasn't sure I could fully handle yet, but at the same time, I hated myself for doing it. I hated the suspicion, the paranoia, the way it was consuming me from the inside, and yet I couldn't stop, because, deep down, I knew the truth was out there, and I had to find it before it destroyed me completely. I was losing sleep, I was losing myself, but most of all, I was losing the life I thought I had. Every smile, every touch, every laugh we had shared suddenly felt tainted. And I couldn't help but wonder, the man I loved so deeply, was he, even the man I thought I knew? The answer lay somewhere in the shadows, hidden behind deleted messages, whispered names, and a love that now felt fragile, vulnerable, and terrific. I told myself I was doing it for closure, for the truth, for some semblance of control in the chaos my life had become. But in reality, I was terrified. I created a fake profile online, something unrecognizable yet believable, and I reached out to her. Emily. I typed the message over and over, deleting it before sending it, unsure if I had the courage. But finally, I hit send. "Hi, I just wanted to ask you something. It's about David." The response came within minutes. She seemed hesitant, but her words carried a weight I could feel even through the screen. "Maria, or whoever you are, I think you deserve to know the truth." My heart pounded. My hand shook. I leaned back in my chair, bracing myself. Emily's story unfolded slowly, almost cautiously, but every word landed like a hammer. "David, he told me he wasn't happy, that he loved me still, that he wanted to be with me. He lied to you. Every day, the trips, the late nights, they weren't work. They were meetings with me." I froze. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. The man I had trusted, the man I had loved so completely, had been living two lives, and I hadn't known. "I don't know why he did it," Emily continued. "Maybe he was weak. Maybe he didn't know how to tell you. But I think you deserve to know everything." I felt my chest tighten. My hands gripped the edge of the desk. "Everything," I whispered to myself. And I realized I wanted it all. Every lie, every meeting, every whispered name. I wanted to see the full picture. The flashbacks came unbidden. I remembered the business trips that lasted late into the night, the excuses that never quite made sense, the hotel receipts that didn't add up, the perfume on his coat. Every detail suddenly formed a pattern, a mosaic of betrayal I couldn't unsee. I saw him in my mind's eye, charming, smiling, pretending to love me fully, while hiding a secret life that had been running parallel to ours for months, maybe years. I remembered that night in our bedroom. The whisper of her name, the voice that had haunted me, refusing to leave. "Emily," I whispered aloud, tasting the betrayal in my mouth. I needed to know everything. I pushed Emily gently, asking for dates, places, times. Each detail was like a new stab in my heart, confirming what I had feared. "He's been lying, Maria, all of it." And I didn't know how to stop it either, Emily typed. I wanted to shake her through the screen. I wanted to scream, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" But I didn't. I had to stay calm. I needed clarity. As I pieced together the timeline, it became horrifyingly clear. The business trips weren't for clients. The late-night calls weren't for work. The whispers weren't innocent. Everything had been orchestrated, meticulously, to keep me in the dark while he lived another life. I remembered the times I had caught a fleeting glance, a smirk, a hesitation. Every tiny moment that had felt off suddenly had meaning. I had questioned myself for so long, doubted my instincts, convinced myself I was imagining things. And all the while, he had been living a lie I cried that night. Cried until I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was suffocating, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I hated him, I loved him. I felt rage, despair, heartbreak, and disbelief all at once. And yet, I felt a spark, a tiny ember of determination. I would not let this destroy me completely. How could he do this? I whispered into the empty room, shaking with anger and sorrow. The answer didn't come. Not fully, but I didn't need it yet. What I needed was the truth, the evidence, the confirmation of everything I had feared. And Emily had given me that dot. The next days were a blur. I replayed every moment with him, looking at the world through new, distrustful eyes. I watched, I waited, I listened. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle change in his behavior became a clue. I thought back to the first night I had overheard his whispered name. I had questioned myself then, wondering if I had imagined it. Now I knew Emily. That single word had been the first thread, unraveling the tapestry of my perfect life. And with that revelation came clarity. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't weak. I had been deceived by someone I loved, someone I had trusted with my entire heart, and now, armed with the truth, I began to feel a dangerous sense of power. I could hurt him back, I could expose him, I could reclaim my life. But first, I needed more proof, evidence, the full scope of the double life he had been leading. The man I loved, the man I had thought I knew, had been living two lives, and I was going to see both. I sat alone in the dark, laptop glowing softly, tears streaking my cheeks. I felt numb, yet alive in a way I hadn't felt before. Rage and heartbreak had merged into something sharp, focused. I will not be his victim, I whispered to myself. Not anymore. The next step was clear. I had to plan. I had to observe. I had to gather everything. Every lie, every secret, every hidden moment. Because the truth had been revealed, and now it was my turn. I was no longer the wife who trusted blindly. I was a woman awakened, a woman betrayed, a woman who had glimpsed the shadow behind the man she loved, and I would not forget it. The heartache was real. The betrayal was deep, but even in the darkest moment, a new thought burned brighter than the pain. He had underestimated me. He had assumed I would stay blind. He had assumed I would accept it. He was wrong. After discovering the truth, I couldn't sleep for nights. Every time I closed my eyes, David's smile haunted me, and every whispered lie echoed in my mind. Rage, heartbreak, and disbelief were tangled together, but slowly, a cold clarity began to form. I didn't want to just survive this betrayal. I wanted to reclaim my life, to expose the man who had shattered everything. I began planning quietly, deliberately. There was no room for emotion or impulse. It had to be meticulous. I sat at our desk, laptop open, notepad beside me, and a cup of untouched coffee cooling in the dim light. I started with evidence. Bank statements from his accounts, receipts from business trips, emails and messages he had tried to hide, photographs of him with Emily there she hadn't known I had been watching. Every piece added another thread to the web of deception he had spun. I cataloged everything, making sure I had the full picture. I won't let him erase this. Not anymore, I whispered, writing down every date, every lie, every betrayal. The lawyer came next. I needed to understand my rights, my options, and the most devastating ways to protect myself. He was professional.com, unaware of the storm I carried in my chest. We'll make sure everything is in order. You won't see this coming, the lawyer said, and I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Days passed, and I continued the act of normalcy. I smiled at him, laughed at his jokes, acted like nothing had changed. Inside, every heartbeat was calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. David remained blissfully unaware. He still believed I trusted him completely, still believed he had fooled me, still believed our marriage was intact. Little did he know, the end of his perfect life was quietly being written by me. The house was glowing with candlelight. Both our families were present. David was animated, showing off his charm, as usual, oblivious to the storm that had been brewing behind my calm eyes. I moved through the crowd with grace, sipping my wine, waiting for the right moment. Every smile I gave, every laugh, was a mask. Inside, I was poised like a predator, ready to strike. When the dinner reached its peak, I knew it was time. David had prepared a speech about love, loyalty, and commitment, his own words, meant to impress our families. Perfect, I'll let him begin. Maria, these 10 years, you've been my rock, my everything. I raised my hand politely, interrupting, and smiled at the room. I'd like to add something, I said, my voice calm but cutting through the air like glass. David froze. His smile faltered. You see, I continued, sometimes the truth is hidden where you least expect it. And sometimes the person you love most is living a life you don't even know exists. The room went silent. Families leaned in. David's eyes widened, confusion flashing across his face. I turned the laptop toward the crowd and began showing the evidence. Text messages to Emily, photographs of secret meetings, receipts of fabricated trips. Gasps filled the room. I watched as his carefully crafted image crumbled in front of everyone. He tried to speak, to deny, to charm, but there was no way out. I held up a single text. I can't wait to see you, Emily. The words burned like fire. David's face went pale. His attempts at gaslighting failed spectacularly. Our families stared at him in disbelief. My parents' eyes were wide with shock. My in-laws whispered to each other. I trusted you, I said, my voice steady now, every syllable deliberate. I loved you. I believed in us. And this is how you repay that love. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There were no words left that could undo the betrayal. He tried to deflect, to charm, to excuse himself, but the evidence spoke louder than any excuse. Every lie, every deception, every secret he had kept was laid bare before everyone who mattered. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that I was no longer the naive, trusting wife. I had changed, and now I was in control. I turned back to the room. This isn't just about a marriage. It's about respect, honesty, loyalty, values he chose to discard. Whispers filled the room. My family's support was unwavering. I could feel their pride. I felt powerful, calm, and in control for the first time in weeks. David tried one last time to defend himself, his voice shaky. Maria, I know, I interrupted, voice rising but controlled. No more lies, no more excuses. Not here, not ever. The humiliation was complete. The truth had won. The man who had betrayed me had been exposed, and there was no escape from the consequences. Later, after the families had left, I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. My hands were trembling not with fear, but with release. The tension that had held me captive for weeks was finally gone. I thought about David Slumday, slumped in the living room, defeated, stripped of his charm, his lies, and his power. And I realized something. I had survived. I had not only survived, I had thrived. This is just the beginning, I whispered to myself. The rest of my life is mine. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. For the first time, I felt the stirrings of peace. But even in that calm, I knew there was more to come. I had revealed his lies to the world. But the journey toward true freedom and justice was far from over. I had uncovered the betrayal, I had confronted it, and now I would rebuild everything he had tried to destroy. The man I loved had assumed he could hide the truth. He had assumed I would remain blind, passive, broken. He was wrong. I had found my voice, my strength, my power, and he would never underestimate me again. The morning after the anniversary dinner, our house was silent, almost eerily so. The storm had passed, leaving only wreckage behind. David was nowhere to be seen, and I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm settle over me. For months, my life had been a whirlwind of doubt, betrayal, and heartbreak, and now it was mine again. I've met with the lawyer to finalize the divorce. Sitting across from him, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I wasn't the broken woman who had confronted him weeks ago. I was calm, poised, empowered. Everything is in order. He won't be able to contest anything effectively, the lawyer said, sliding the final papers across the desk. I picked them up and signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like a victory, a reclaiming of the life he had tried to control. When I returned home, I walked through the room slowly, taking in the silence. It was different now, not oppressive, but freeing. I could breathe without holding back. I could move without watching my back. I could live without the shadow of his deception hanging over me. David's world, on the other hand, was crumbling. I heard from mutual friends that he had lost respect at work, colleagues whispering about his lies, his charm failing miserably outside the walls of our home. Even his reputation with family and friends had taken a hit. I didn't feel joy in his downfall, not really. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake, it was justice. I focused on myself after that. Therapy became my refuge. I learned how to process the anger, the grief, the betrayal. I began writing again, something I had abandoned in the chaos of his lies. I started exercising, eating well, reconnecting with friends I had neglected. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of happiness, not the dependent, shaky happiness of a wife clinging to her marriage. This was my happiness, steady, affirmed, and unapologetic. But even as I rebuilt my life, a lingering question gnawed at me. Why had it happened? Why had David lived a double life? I started asking questions discreetly, talking to friends, acquaintances, and even his family. That's when the real truth hit me harder than anything David had ever done. His family had known. Every trip, every message, every secret meeting with Emily, they had known and stayed silent. They had smiled at me, pretended to sympathize with my life, all while covering for him. Their silence had been an accomplice to his betrayal. I remember sitting in my kitchen, the tea cooling in my hand, staring at the wall as the revelation sank in. The real betrayal wasn't just David's lies. It was their silence, their complicity, the way they had allowed this to happen under their own roof. I felt a wave of emotional disbelief, and finally, clarity. I realized I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could control what came next. I stopped thinking of them as family. They had lost that privilege. My energy, my love, my loyalty, all of it belonged to me now. Not to him, not to them, not to anyone who had betrayed me. I rebuilt my life slowly, deliberately. I moved into a new apartment, decorated it exactly the way I wanted. Each piece of furniture, each color on the wall was a statement. This space was mine, and I controlled it. I started dating again, cautiously, carefully, not because I needed someone else to validate me, but because I wanted to feel alive, to feel desire and connection, on my own terms. I learned how to forgive, to not him, not his family, but myself, for staying so long, for loving so deeply, for trusting. I realized none of that was weakness. It was strength disguised as vulnerability, and I had survived, thrived. Even months later, I ran into Emily again. There was no anger between us, a shared understanding of what had happened. You did the right thing, she said softly. You took back your life. I nodded. I had to. For me, her words felt like confirmation, not of the betrayal, but of my strength. I had weathered the storm, and I had come out stronger. Betrayal broke me, but truth rebuilt me. I learned that love is powerful, but self-love is unstoppable. I discovered that silence can be a weapon, but action measured, deliberate, and courageous, his armor, David's lies, his double life, his family's complicity, they cannot touch me anymore. Not my heart, not my mind, not my life. About the years we had spent together, the promises he had made, the life I had imagined, and I smiled not with nostalgia, but with resolve. I had been betrayed, yes, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and finally free. The house of lies he had built for himself had collapsed, and in its place, I built something real, something that could never be taken away. The final twist came unexpectedly. I discovered a small stack of letters from his family, hidden in a drawer he thought I would never open. They weren't addressed to me, they were instructions, advice on covering up his meetings, tips on keeping me in the dark. I read them, my hand shaking, and laughed softly, not in despair, but in disbelief at the audacity. They had been part of the deception all along, and yet here I was, unbroken and free. The real betrayal wasn't his lies, I whispered to myself. It was their silence. I placed the letters back carefully, untouched, a silent monument to the people who had underestimated me. And for the first time, I felt complete closure. I had confronted the lies, exposed the betrayal, reclaimed my life, and discovered my own strength in the process. To anyone watching this, anyone who has been betrayed, anyone who has loved and lost trust, you will survive. You will rebuild. You will emerge stronger than you ever imagined. Betrayal is devastating, but truth is power. And sometimes the darkest secrets aren't hidden in the lie. They're hidden in the silence of those who should have loved you. But silence doesn't have to define you. You do, and I chose to define myself.